Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors meeting May 8th, 2024 to order at this time. And I'll start with congratulations team SVCE. At Cal CCA's annual conference last month, SVCE was recognized in the Decarbonization Awards category, and the award is right there in front of all of us to enjoy. Our CEO, Monica Padilla, will talk more about it under the CEO report. All I would like to share is that we were well represented by staff and some board members. So thank you all for taking part there. And let's have a roll call, Andrea.
Yes, thank you. Director Showalter.
Here.
Scozola.
Here.
Mohan.
Here.
Mekachuk.
Present.
Chair Walia.
Here.
Vice Chair Tyson.
Here.
Director Klein.
Here.
Meadows.
Here.
Martinez Patran.
Here.
Risto.
Here.
Thank you. I will note that Directors Lee, Shua, and Hilton are absent, but we do have a quorum of our board this evening.
Thank you so much. Let's start with public comments on matters not listed on the agenda. Andrea, do we have someone, and can you explain the process?
Yes, currently we do not have anybody in person or anybody online. If you would be interested in making a public comment, please raise your virtual hand and you will be called on. You will have 3 minutes to make your statement once unmuted. And there are no hands raised.
Okay, then let's move on to the consent calendar. And we have items 1A through 1K on the consent calendar tonight. Any public comment? Seeing none, let's have a motion unless somebody...
Move the consent calendar.
Thank you, Director Klein. Second.
I'll second.
Director Mekachuk. Can we have... Oh, we don't need roll call vote. Can we have a vote, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstains? No? So no abstention, no noes, all ayes, whoever is present. Wonderful. Let's move on to the regular calendar, and we will start with the CEO's report. And this is a discussion item. Monica, all yours.
All right. Good evening, Chair Walea and directors. So if you didn't notice, I expanded the CEO report a little bit this go around. So there's a little more information in there, but I did want to highlight a few things. First of all, a big congratulations to Sophia Zhang. She is currently one of our Climate Corps Fellows, and she has been recently promoted. And more importantly, this was a hard negotiation. She accepted to come work for SVCE. So she'll start in September in the Power Resources team as an associate power analyst. So we're excited to have her on full-time and permanently. It is with sad news that I report that Adam Sullivan, our Director of Energy Services and Community Relations, is leaving Silicon Valley Clean Energy. His last work day was yesterday, and he'll be joining PG&E to help the city of San Jose get electrified. So hopefully he'll bring back some positive learnings from his experience there to SVCE. As Chair Walea noted, we received an award at the Cal CCA conference, and thank you to all the board members who attended the Cal CCA conference. From what I've heard, everybody enjoyed it. We had quite a showing because it was local. We had a lot of staff there. I think we had a lot of fun. We were recognized. We got to facilitate panels. We got to facilitate discussions. We got to be on panels. So there was a lot of SVCE presence at the Cal CCA annual conference. But one of the big things that we want to note is the award that we received. And Mayor Klein, you were not there, but you were featured on the big screen. We got to showcase your project that we did for the Sunnyvale Elementary School. So congratulations again. Come by and touch it. You need to wear white gloves, though. So you can take a picture with it, too, if you like. Another thing that I wanted to note that is not in the CEO report is that, as several of you may know, SVCE submitted a $50 million grant to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, back in April, to serve as the lead agency at the request of 5 local cities pursuing municipal building resiliency and decarbonization. These agencies approached SVCE after they had been working on a joint proposal for this grant and realized late in the game that they needed a separate lead agency, so they came to SVCE. The EPA requires that we execute, that is, that SVCE execute a memorandum of agreement for this grant, and we will be bringing that agreement to you for your consideration in June. The grant proposal includes the funding SVCE will need to administer the grant requirements. And in case you're wondering, the 5 agencies that asked us to do this were the City of Cupertino, City of Morgan Hill, City of Mountain View, City of Sunnyvale, and the City of San Jose. So hopefully we'll be successful there. And then with that, I'm actually going to invite our Director of Legislative Affairs and Legislative and Government Affairs, Benna Chang, to come provide a brief update on the income graduated fixed charge. Oh, and Sitlali Sandoval as well.
Good evening, Chair and Board. Benna Chang. Really delighted to be here today to talk to you about the income graduated fixed charge and to give you an update. As Monica mentioned, my colleague Sitlali is here as well from the regulatory side, and our colleague Colleen is on the line as well, who is our data analyst and did some analysis on income graduated fixed charge. So next slide. We wanted to give you an update, thank you, on income graduated fixed charge tonight. As you might remember, this came out of a bill that the governor signed about 2 years ago, AB 205. It's a very large bill, but one of the components in that bill was to direct the CPUC to allow IOUs to charge an income graduated fixed charge. And this policy idea really contains 2 main pieces to it. First, it sets a fixed charge that is a flat fee versus a usage-based charge. And then secondly, that flat fee would be varied based on income. So the main update here is that the CPUC recently came out with a proposed decision, actually a revised decision very recently, that we expect them to adopt this week on May 9th. And you might remember that during the CPUC process, there were a lot of stakeholders who submitted different ideas for the fixed charge amount and the income tiers. For example, PG&E at one point had proposed a fixed charge of $92 for the highest income customers. So you'll see that the proposed decision that the CPUC ended up with actually brings that fixed charge amount down pretty significantly. So the highest income customers would have a cap of $24.15. So that's a maximum amount that they would pay for a fixed charge. And then CARE customers, as well as FARA customers, or people who live at subsidized affordable housing, would also get a lower amount of fixed charge. So the fixed charges that the CPUC decided upon include many things on the PG&E side of the bill. So this includes things, for example, charges that are related to billing or to meter costs, as well as a public purpose program. And as I mentioned, the fixed charge amounts are really maximum charges, and the actual amount would vary based on the revenue requirement for each of these fixed charge categories. And again, we're expecting the CPUC to vote on this week, and then the implementation for PG&E customers would be sometime around the first quarter of 2026. You might have also heard that there have been a lot of legislative proposals around this issue this year. Most of those legislative proposals have stopped moving at this point. The one remaining bill that is outstanding is SB 1292 by Bradford, which is really a reporting bill, so the legislature can understand what the impacts are of income graduated fixed charge. And finally, we wanted to share some of the findings that we had from a analysis of customer impacts of income graduated fixed charge. During this analysis, we considered several scenarios, but wanted to share with you just the key takeaways about the impacts of the CPUC's proposed decision tonight, since that is the active proposal that's being considered right now. we wanted to just bring a couple of the key highlights here to the board for your awareness. One of the questions that we wanted to answer through our analysis was how income graduated fixed charge relates to SVCE's mission around decarbonization and electrification. So generally, what we found in the analysis is that electricity usage, for the most part, the more you use, the more bill savings you have with a fixed charge compared to a scenario without a fixed charge. We also know that it's been a big topic of concern about how low-income customers might be impacted through this proposal. And based on our analysis, under the CPUC proposal, about half of Silicon Valley Clean Energy's care customers will see an average decrease of about 4% on their bills. And I also note here that the CPUC decision leaves out certain groups of low-income customers. So for example, if you make 80% of area median income, but you don't live in subsidized affordable housing, you're not captured under the CPUC's proposal. So really the way the program is structured could not capture all the need in our community. And then finally, we know that there's been a lot of conversation about rooftop solar customers. And in our analysis, we found that generally rooftop solar customers mirror all customers, where the higher your usage, the more bill savings you have compared to without a fixed charge. But we know that rooftop solar customers tend to have low or even negative usage. So that's part of the impact. And generally, we think the costs that are part of the CPUC's fixed charge make sense for all customers to pay. So again, those are billing costs, costs of meters, et cetera. So finally, wanted to share what we've been doing on both the legislative and the regulatory side around income graduated fixed charge. On the regulatory front, we've been working through CalCCA mainly, and CalCCA had a few wins through the regulatory process. I think the most major one to mention to the board is that we were able to keep generation costs out of income graduated fixed charge. So this is really about the PG&E side of the bill. It's unclear at this point if there'll be any additional legislative action on income graduated fixed charge, but we will continue to monitor this issue, report back out to the board, and work through CalCCA on that issue. With that, I will pause and see if there's any questions.
You are good as always, Benna. Please carry on.
Great. I think that concludes our report.
Okay, there is a question. Director Showalter.
Okay. I was wondering about the 2026 start date. That seems like that's a lot of lead time. What's the story behind that?
Do you want to take this one?
Yes, so PG&E's implementation start date is a quarter after the other investor-owned utilities in California, SDG&E and SE, because it has a different billing system that can't accommodate the technical changes that need to be made in order to bill the fixed charge. And so that's why they were given more lead time for implementation.
Thank you.
So I have a quick question. The way I look at it now, we are looking at care customers, FERA customers, and everyone else. One big question that had persisted for a while under the prior proposal was how and who will be monitoring who fits into which category, income-based. So is this going to be simpler, and who takes care of that?
Yes, so the utilities will be monitoring that, the investor-owned utilities. And so they already know who is enrolled in CARE and FERA. The newest category is the Tier 2, which includes households making 80% AMI living in affordable housing. And that the utilities will be required to develop a process where they need to reach out to those households, and the households need to go through a self-attestation process in order to benefit from the second tier. But for everyone else, if you're not already flagged as on care or FARA, then you would be defaulted into the third tier.
Okay, and that may simplify things and also reduce a lot of angst that plenty of residents had about their income being managed, or the big concern being who is managing and in what manner.
Right.
Right? Okay, thank you. Very helpful. Director Klein?
Yes, just a quick question as far as, so being part of CARE is actually fairly important from this standpoint. Are we doing any outreach to our customers on trying to sign them up in a lot faster and kind of breaking down some of those barriers and working with some of our community partners to do outreach in some of the, I'll say, underserved communities that sometimes aren't either the best English speakers or don't know, you know, how to get some of the services that they're really should get?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. I will take a shot at this, and I'm also looking at Pam in case I get anything wrong or she has anything else to add. She's here tonight too. But yes, you bring up a great point that CARE enrollment is really critically important. I know that in some of our marketing outreach materials, we do talk about, you know, here's a process for how to sign up for CARE. And I know that we've been talking internally too about how to really supercharge that effort.
I'll just add one thing, which is that we plan to participate in an MENO working group that the IOUs are required to put together. And I think that will be part of the discussion, but we'll be participating in that working group.
Okay, thank
It's a
you.
marketing, education, outreach working group. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything else. How about you, or back to CEO Padilla?
Yeah, that was essentially my CEO report. Just one other thing to highlight is that we do have in the report as attachment, I think it's the fourth attachment, attachment 4, a look ahead on what we plan to bring to the board in terms of more of the big items, policy items, budget, strategic planning. So if you ever have any question about what's coming up, look to the CEO report, or certainly reach out to me or Andrea if you want to make sure that we include something that's not on that list. So with that, I conclude my CEO report.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Benna and Sitlali. So just one quick remark, or a couple of quick remarks, Monica. Thank you. The new format of the CEO report is just wonderful. I can say that for myself, and I'm sure the others have appreciated it as well. And congratulations to Sophia Zhang for staying with us. You mentioned that earlier. Good luck to Adam. And yet again, a big thanks to Don Bray for stepping in to help SVCE once again. Couple more things. Earth Day events, SVCE team, you did a phenomenal job. You covered 15 cities. I know I made it to Cupertino at least. And somehow all these things happen on the same day. But you guys do a great job, and that's why I'm mentioning that. It's difficult to do that. You did great. One very high-level observation from Cal CCA conference. I felt that SVCE is highly respected in the CCA world here, and we seem to be on track and that we are doing well. That was reassuring, not that I needed that, but it's always good to get that sense. Brand SVCE was very well represented, and Don Bray was there as a moderator, and our CEO Monica Padilla presented, and I believe Marin was in one of the other sessions as well presenting. So that's great. And my last comment is something I shared just offline before the meeting. So I'd like to share with everyone here, it's great to see the impact SVCE is making. I speak from my city, that I recently ran into a resident, totally different context. We were talking of something else, and she thanked me that in her house, pretty much being redone, because of SVCE, she was able to get help where the contractors were not familiar, but she was able to make sure how to get the heat pump water heaters and things like that. So I'm going to dig more into it and figure out exactly what worked. Is it the social media stuff that Pam sends us that our cities present, or is it our CDD department, or is it coming directly from SVCE website? Perhaps all of those. So that's my request to my colleagues here as well. If you hear anything like that, please bring it back to SVCE. It just shows how our decarb programs are working, both in terms of the dollars we are putting there and the policies. Those are my comments. Other thoughts? Seeing none, let's move on to, public comment. I need to take public comment. Andre, do we have anyone here? Online? No? Okay, with that, I close item number 2, and we go to item number 3, which is to adopt a resolution approving the Hanford Hybrid Plant Emissions Mitigation Guidelines. And we are going to have Seetlali Sandoval, our Senior Regulatory Advisor, presenting this item.
Good evening. Good evening, directors. Good evening, directors. I'm Seetlali Sandoval, and I am a Senior Regulatory Advisor. And this evening, I will be presenting item number 3, which is the Hanford Hybrid Plant Emissions Mitigation Guidelines. The purpose of today's presentation is to present you with the emissions mitigation guidelines, as well as seek your adoption of a resolution approving the guidelines. And first, I'd like to start off presenting some background on the guidelines and why they were developed. Last spring, the board adopted resolution number 2023-06, which approved a 12-year power purchase agreement with the Hanford Hybrid Natural Gas Power Plant and Battery Energy Storage System. And that resolution required staff to develop a policy or guidelines to set aside funds for projects or programs that would help to mitigate the emissions associated with the energy produced by the Hanford Hybrid Plant. And all of this activity is really a result of SVCE being proactive about ensuring that its portfolio management activities leave a net positive impact on communities. Before I get into the actual content of the guidelines, I wanted to spend a little time providing an overview of the Hanford Hybrid Plant's location and the community. So Hanford is located in Kings County, which is in the San Joaquin Valley. The population in 2021 was a little over 58,000, and Hanford's median household income for a family of 4 is a little over $43,000. Hanford has also been designated a disadvantaged community by the California Environmental Protection Agency's Cal EnviroScreen 4.0, which looks at various factors based on a community's pollution burden, as well as socioeconomic factors to designate disadvantaged communities. Next, I want to describe the Hanford Hybrid Plant. California is facing a very tight supply of resource adequacy, and the Hanford Hybrid Plant is a hybrid natural gas peaker power plant and battery energy storage system that SVCE contracted with for 12 years to ensure that we could meet our reliability requirements that are part of the CPUC's resource adequacy program. So the natural gas peaker portion of the unit will primarily run for grid reliability. So for example, in the late summer, if the grid is under strained conditions, then the peaking portion can quickly start up and start generating energy within 10 minutes of being idle. And the battery energy storage portion of the hybrid plant, which SVCE added to the site, will displace the use of the peaker, and it will shift energy to when it is needed once per day. Due to the very tight RA supply conditions, the Hanford plant is likely to have run through the end of the decade and even past it, whether or not SVCE had contracted for the unit. And so our hybridization of the plant, which is the addition of the battery energy storage system, is expected to decrease the utilization rate of the gas portion of the plant because the battery will displace the peaker. So the projected energy dispatch at the start of the contract period is around 5,000 metric tons of CO2 per year. And to put this into context, it's about 0.02% of the California Public Utilities Commission's electric sector greenhouse gas emissions target for 2030, which is 25 million metric tons of CO2. Additionally, I'd like to call your attention to the graph on the right side of the slide, which is a graph of Hanford's capacity factor, which is the ratio of how much energy the plant can produce in a year to what it's capable of producing in that same year. And as you can see, the contractual limit is about 22%, but the actual in 2022 was 2%, meaning that the plant is running very little. Next, I am going to get into the, thank you. Next, could you go back 2 slides? Okay. Actually, one more slide. Sorry, we're having some issues with the slides. There we go. Okay, so next I'm going to get into the actual emissions mitigation guideline goals, and there were really 2. The first is that we were trying to position the guidelines so that they would ensure that we could fund existing programs to help reduce emissions from greenhouse gases through electrification activities in disadvantaged or low-income communities in Kings County, because that's where the plant is located. And the second goal was to recommend a funding amount range that could make a meaningful impact and is substantial enough to spend resources and time on. Next slide, please. Now onto the actual guidelines. So there's 7 key elements in these guidelines, and I will go through them all. The first is that the guidelines establish the Hanford Hybrid Plant Emissions Mitigation Fund, which we're calling the Hanford Fund. And the guidelines also specify that the Hanford Fund will be used to fund existing local programs to help reduce emissions from greenhouse gases through electrification activities in disadvantaged or low-income communities in Kings County. The third key element of the guidelines is that they recommend a one-time funding allocation of $750,000 to $1.8 million. This is a one-time funding allocation, and it's for the entire duration of the Hanford contract, which is 12 years. And it represents a little over 0.5% to 1.5% of SVC's total program's budget allocation. The fourth key element is that the guidelines specify that the Hanford Fund will be used to pay for activities led by organizations that are working in Kings County. And they also require the collection of feedback from the community to be used to determine the best course of action for utilizing the Hanford Fund, as well as the final funding amount, because the guidelines recommend a range. The sixth key element of the guidelines is that they require SVCE staff to evaluate the effectiveness of the fund disbursements and report on progress to the board in the board information packet on an annual basis following the first disbursement from the fund and until the entire Hanford Fund has been dispersed if necessary. Finally, the guidelines specify that all the funds in the Hanford Fund must be dispersed by June 1st of 2036, which is when the contract ends. Next slide, please. So a key cornerstone of these guidelines is the requirement for stakeholder engagement to be conducted. And this is really going to allow SVCE to receive feedback directly from Kings County community members. So the process will help us understand what the community's priorities are and the types of emission reduction programs that would be most beneficial to Kings County residents. The feedback that is collected will also be used to determine the funding amount within the approved range that could most effectively be dispersed. Next slide, please. So to conclude, I'd just like to say that the adoption of the Hanford Hybrid Plant Emissions Mitigation Guidelines will enable staff to meet the board's directive to develop a policy or guidelines to set aside funds that will be used for programs or projects to help mitigate emissions associated with the energy produced by the Hanford Hybrid Plant. Next slide, please. And I'd like to close out with the recommendation for the board to adopt Resolution 2024-09, which would approve the Hanford Hybrid Plant Emissions Mitigation Guidelines. And the resolution provides for four things. It specifies the types of projects that will be funded to help mitigate the emissions associated with the Hanford Hybrid Plant during the 12-year term of the power purchase agreement. It establishes a fund of no less than $750,000 to no more than $1.8 million. And then it authorizes the chief executive officer to disperse the funds and requires staff to report back to the board of directors on the effectiveness of the fund 1 year after the first disbursement and on an annual basis thereafter, if necessary. Thank you, and I will take questions now.
Thank you, Citlali. Questions? Go ahead.
Well, since I'm relatively new to the board, this is the first time I've heard of this, and I'm really fascinated by how the background of it seems to be completely based on environmental justice principles, which I think in Hanford is maybe very appropriate. But I do have a couple of questions about the amount of greenhouse gas reductions we're expecting to generate with this money. Is there some sort of an accounting that's been done to investigate how much GHGs will be reduced by this and how much the GHG emissions are at the plant?
Yes, so for the emissions at the plant, we have historical data because it's not a new plant, it's already been operating. And then in terms of the potential emissions reductions from the programs, we don't know that yet because we don't know what programs we will fund. So the first step is to conduct the stakeholder process in Kings County to understand what types of programs would most benefit the community. And then from there, we could look at that type of information once we know what the projects would be.
May I add a bit too? So just to be clear, the power plant that exists in Hanford, the peaker unit, has been there for decades, and it will continue to be there with or without our support in the contract that the board approved last year. So that project, that plant is a peaker plant, and it's needed for reliability. So it runs, but it has limitations on how much it can run because it's not the most efficient plant. So it typically runs for reliability purposes or when market conditions are really tight. And so what we were able to do with the inclusion of the battery, which is a new clean resource, is we believe that over time, the battery will compete with the peaker plant for interconnection capacity, and therefore over time the emissions will decrease as the project runs and the battery runs more and more and more. So just by our involvement with that battery, it reduces emissions. But to Lali's point, we didn't want to come up with metric tons of emissions to target because that would be really hard for us to determine because the plant runs based on economics and reliability purposes. We can make some forecasts, but we didn't want to tie the fund to a specific emission reduction target. Instead, we're going to go into the community and see what types of measures or programs or education or whatever else that community needs in order to help be part of the big transition to this clean grid, which relies less and less on natural gas.
No, I understand that, and I think that's great. And the other thing is, and then in a sense, this is really much more of a standard CEQA mitigation. When you think of it, you're doing something we're doing something that's going to help the people who have been impacted by this plant. That's going to be a mitigation that occurs right there, right in their community. And so the GHG reduction from a global point of view might not be as high, but in terms of it improving the lives of those people, it will. But it's just that there's a lot of different ways to think about these. And I was just really interested that we took on, I think of SVCE as we're all into electricity and power. And so when I saw these environmental justice principles, which are, really in the last 5 years, they've come much more to the surface than they ever were before. I think it's something that we should explicitly talk about. Sometimes we talk about it as equity, sometimes we talk about it as environmental justice, but it's important that all of us kind of know this environmental lingo. So that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Thank you for that, yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that additional information CEO Padilla brought here. Some of us on the executive committee went through a lot of discussion, so it's good that you're bringing out more points. Director Mohan, then Director Scusola. That's how I saw the hands raised.
My question was, is this the first time SVCE is involved in establishing a fund like the Hanford Fund? Or has it been tried and tested and tried before?
This is, this is the first time SVCE develops a program such as the Hanford Fund.
Okay. And have there been other, outside of SVCE, have there been other initiatives like this tried by others?
There haven't been other initiatives exactly like this, but there have been different community benefit programs that are tied to power purchase agreements that other CCAs have signed, but something exactly like this has not been done.
Just one effort that we did undertake when the board allowed us to take the nuclear allocation carbon-free attributes associated with PG&E's Diablo Canyon power plant. At that time, we also came up with the program where we would calculate after the fact how much dollars we saved by not going out on the market and buying a like carbon-free type product, and then take those savings and use those savings in our community to help fund some programs. And so, Pam can talk a little bit more about the types of programs what we funded, but they're mostly in low-income areas. And I think we've used the funds to build the tiny house, all-electric home that we're going to be showcasing around the community. So it's kind of a similar thing where we took a somewhat controversial position on a Diablo Canyon allocations, but then we said, we're going to save some money by doing this, and we'll reinvest that money in the community.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a worthwhile project, and I hope you succeed.
Director Scusola?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm very supportive of this idea in general. I just had a quick question, hopefully. I was curious if the battery infrastructure was already existing there, or is that what we're investing in?
No, yes, so it wasn't existing there, and our signing of the contract is what enabled it to be added to the site.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay. Director Martinez Beltran?
Thank you. I was not able to be at executive committee, so I have a couple of comments that I wanted to share. One was, I too am very supportive of this initiative, and I thank you for bringing it forward. I really appreciate the one-year review. I don't know if that was through, staff or colleagues, but I really like that. I'm hoping when we go to the community and find out, what it is that they think would be helpful, that we look and expand our scope rather than just kind of going to, city or people who we think are elected, because it sounds like this is a pretty low-income community and there's lots of need there. I just hope that we can look at the churches, that we're looking at maybe home and school clubs, we're looking at non-English speakers, to try and really understand. Not always does all the community members kind of make it to a representative position. And so I just want to make sure that that is included, that we're putting our little tentacles out there. And then looking at the electrifying, I don't know what ideas are on the, out there, but I would just like to add, I think I would be a big proponent of looking at green electrifying community spaces, spaces for youth, hospitals. Those would be some of the places that come, parks, especially in these places that are just so very hot during the summer, that come to mind for me. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you, and thank you to my colleagues. I heard there was lots of vetting on this, so.
Yes, and this is a pretty good proposal based on a lot of feedback. Director Klein.
Yes, and so thank you, Director Martinez Beltran. Some of those questions definitely came up with the executive board, and I just want to thank staff for bringing back the one-year review, and ultimately it's, as Director Showalter said, this is looking at environmental justice in a larger way, looking at the impacts that I'll say certain communities have been somewhat resistant in the past to move forward in electrification, and looking at, from our standpoint, yes, we're improving that area and kind of the overall grid with the battery backup and trying to deal with the peak. And thank you, Monica, for better defining Hanford for those who aren't familiar with what that project is doing. But to me, this is one of the positive things that we can do. And conceivably, one of the things about the one-year review is most of Central Valley, there's let's say lots of areas that have open space, that these sorts of programs, whatever they might be, to either look at battery storage or energy storage or energy creation, are often in communities that are somewhat resistant to that, and looking at, is this a model that we want to duplicate in other areas? Because we can focus those funds, and what we said at the executive board was focus those funds in our community, but there's also kind of the rest of the state, and conceivably making a bigger change there. And I appreciate the feedback as far as doing outreach into the community. I think that'll be some of the bigger questions, but staff already has a certain amount of ideas as far as that's concerned. So I just want to say thank you for staff of some of the tweaks and some of the additions here in the presentation. It is appreciated, and I think what we're trying to do here is something that conceivably not just we replicate, but other CCAs replicate. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Mekchek, questions?
I'm very impressed with the work that's been done so far on the program, on the fund, and I commend you for that. Couple of quick questions. How many of the local people, the 60,000, how many are employed at the peaker plant? Do you know?
I do not know at this time.
Okay, I was
Probably not very many at all. It doesn't take a lot of staff to operate a peaker plant. They pretty much are on autopilot. And the company that owns it, Middle River Power, I don't even know if they have a presence really there.
okay. Thank you. You are saying the program can be anywhere from 750 to 1.8 million, and I was wondering, and I know that you've got to get some ideas from the community, but do you see that as being that money being evenly spent through the 12 years, or do you see it being largely front-end loaded? Can you just talk to that a bit, or is it too premature?
I would say that my expectation is that it would be front-loaded. I don't expect that at year 12 of the contract, we would still have funds in the Hanford Fund to disperse. That said, we still need to understand exactly what type of program would be most effective and benefit the community the most.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Meadows.
Actually, some of what I was going to say has been covered, so I won't repeat it, but I will say that I really do like the direct nature of the mitigation. I mean, that's what everyone's been saying, but it's not like you book an airline flight and you buy some carbon credits or something, and goodness only knows where they go. And so really having this in the community is, I think, the direction we want to be able to take the mitigations. I think it's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you for, as has been said earlier, some of the feedback was at the exec committee meeting to bring it back to the board in 1 year so that we can have another look at if we can make other suggestions based on the feedback that staff gets. So all great questions right now. Just remember, once again, it will be brought back for our input in a year's time. Okay, public comments, because we were still doing questions and I could see Bruce getting ready there.
It's Bruce Carney, Mountain View resident. Director Showalter's question, as I recall it, was essentially, is there a way to estimate the emissions reductions from the programs that would be funded by the $750,000 and $1.8 million? And the response was, well, no, because we don't know what those programs would be. So I'd like to share some results from the Mountain View Environmental Sustainability Task Force from 2017-18, which I chaired, which had about 30 community members look at things that a city could do, in this case Mountain View, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We took it upon ourselves to estimate the cost and greenhouse gas reduction of 36 different alternative actions that a city could take. And although I must say that we were probably over-optimistic in the impact and underestimated the cost of all 36, we did the best we could. And the range of dollars per metric ton of reduction were, with one exception, from $5 to $2,000. So if you chose the high impact option, you would only spend $5 to reduce a metric ton of CO2. And if you chose the low impact option, it would be $2,000 to achieve the same effect that $5 could have achieved. The one exception was to have paid parking, which actually made money. You got money for each metric ton of reduction because the thought was you'd get money from people who parked and fewer people would park, so there would be fewer emissions. So that actually was seen as a way to fund some of the other things that were more expensive. So I can share that list of proposed projects and those estimated dollars per ton with staff and with the board, and you might find them useful to attempt to select the highest impact projects that make sense for Hanford or for any other community that has a limited number of dollars to spend on GHG reduction.
That will be very helpful. I'm sure we can use that in our cities as well. So we'd appreciate if maybe Andra can forward it to the board. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Sorry, I just want to...
Hold on just one sec.
Okay,
Let me close public comment. I'll forget that. Anyone else public comment? Okay, I close public comment. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, though, in response to the very helpful comment by Mr. Carney, that the point of the public input is really to determine the value to the community. So a better option could be a less GHG mitigating amenity. I'm going to call it amenity. That's not exactly the right word. because the community values it. So it really is not just a straight dollar or value impact. It's also the community benefit.
Very valid point, especially in this case. Yvonne?
I was ready to make an motion to adopt if we're there. If we're not, I don't want to cut off conversation.
I think we are very much there.
Okay, very good. Then I will move to adopt resolution approving the Hanford Hybrid Plan Emissions Mitigation Guidelines. Do I need to read all of those, or?
No, there's a resolution, and
And-
okay. Director Scozola seconded it. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any noes? Any abstentions? Okay, passed unanimously. And we are on track time-wise, wonderful. Okay. No, we are even ahead of time. Let's move on to item number 4, to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute an agreement with Clear Result for the SVCE Commercial and Industrial Decarbonization Program with a not-to-exceed limit of, I'll just round it off, approximately $2.5 million through December 31, 2027. And we have Joey Landy, Energy Services Principal, and Justin Zagunis, Director of Decarbonization Programs and Policy.
Hey, Joey, before you get started, could I just say a couple of words?
Absolutely.
Sure. So just, I mentioned in the CEO report that Director of Energy Services and Community Relations, Adam Sullivan, had left. Well, this was a big thing of Adam's. This was a program that he worked on, that he brought to SVC, that he was the mastermind behind this. So we give lots of credit to Adam for this, and it's sad that he wasn't here to present it. But I also want to say that a true sign of leadership and resiliency of an organization is when somebody leaves, that other people can step in and pick up and run with it. And Joey and Justin and Dawn did that so effectively in the course of 1 week. And so it was a little bit of work to get here tonight, but I'm so excited about this program that I made Joey present on it. And I'm very proud of how well they pitched in together on this. So
Thank you to each one of you, and thank you for sharing that with us, Monica. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Monica. We'll see how we do. And good evening to the board. Excited to present to you tonight our brand new proposed program. Brief introduction to myself, Joey Landy. I'm an Energy Services Principal on the Energy Services team. This is a brand new program, and I'm going to start with a quick overview of what's on offer. So key elements of the program. This is a decarbonization program, offers trainings and workshops, site assessments, project analyses and prioritization, many different elements of customer service. The contract itself has a not to exceed amount of $2.5 million. It's a 3.5-year contract. And one great point to flag here is that it's primarily a pay for performance contract. So expenditures will align with results. The program budget itself, again, the key takeaway here is the pay for performance aspect. This impacts both the Clear Result contract and customer incentives. The contract itself, as you can see in the right-hand side of the table, grounded in 75% performance fees. Even that monthly fixed fee, it's actually not a fixed fee. It's a rate per participant who's enrolled in the program. So overall, totaling roughly $2.5 million for Clear Result. On the customer incentive side, we have yet to develop the exact incentive structure that's part of Clear Result's scope over the coming month. But we have a pot for customer incentives of roughly $2.4 million. Payments will be grounded in avoided metric tons of CO2 basis. And we're going to consider variable rates for different things that customers do under this program. We want to consider a sort of premium rate for innovation, particularly expensive project costs. And we'll also be seeking to leverage external funding wherever possible. There are some really interesting opportunities as this is a new program type and a new program area for decarbonization efforts. So the target market for the program is really our largest key accounts. That means more than 10 million kilowatt hours annually and 250,000 therms. The gas consumption is really the key focus here, being the ripe opportunity for decarbonization. C&I accounts are incredibly important from a gas consumption perspective and represent a significant opportunity. C&I accounts are 40% of the total gas usage in our service area. But even more than that, it's just 20 accounts that represent 43% of that C&I usage. So long story short, a little bit of traction and some savings with that small group of C&I accounts goes a long way towards meeting significant emissions avoidance targets. This is a new program area for SVCE. It's also a new program generally. I think this is the first C&I decarbonization program that I've heard of. It's one of the first in the country, if not the first. Our focus is, of course, gas and non-residential buildings. And these are sort of the programmatic areas that we're seeking to prop up and provide service for. So affordability, of course, reducing customer bills is what's going to drive customer uptake of projects and participation. Ease of participation. This is a very customer-centric program, and we're going to get into that in a little more detail in the coming slides. It does support workforce as a big part of this type of program model, is actually building up energy management, carbon management capability in-house with our customers. And a lot about awareness, raising awareness around sustainability within an organization, but also awareness about SVCE and strengthening relationships with us. So one important aspect in considering how to frame C&I programs is understanding that they have incredibly unique operations. There's a lot of different stuff happening. They're producing different items, different business models, and these facilities have been built up over time with a lot of specialized equipment. So the way to engage C&I customers, in our perspective, is start by learning and listening. Understanding what their priorities are, what they're currently doing, what they're making. And we're not going to win them over with a device, a piece of equipment, and a rebate that goes along with that. A lot of that is grounded in the fact that, again, these facilities being built up over time, a lot of times it happens because there was a business need 20 years ago and a new building was stood up. New pipes and lines were directed towards that facility to meet that need at that point, but it was never revisited. So there's oftentimes a lot of waste in how these things are set up. And one way I like to think about it is what a traditional program might do versus what we would expect to do in this type of program model. A traditional program would look to the end use load. And off to the right is a fairly generic picture of a pump room. And so in this case, we look to the motor. How efficient is this motor? Is there an opportunity to do a motor rewind or replace it and therefore gain some savings, driving customer benefit, giving some value to SVCE? But in the case of a C&I program, the other questions might be, what is being pumped and where is it being pumped to? Is it heated? Where does the heat come from? Is there an opportunity for heat recovery? Is it running when it's supposed to be? Is it the right number of motors and pumps? And so these are small tweaks, but they often haven't been thought of. Everyone has their job description focused on exactly it is what they need to be doing. And visiting some of these fundamental assumptions can net real gas savings opportunity. This could just as well be a boiler plant or a compressed air system. It doesn't really matter, but the key questions remain the same. Are the pipes running half a mile with 50 elbows along the way in uninsulated piping? So this program builds on a really strong energy efficiency program model. I'm going to talk about it a little bit because it sets the stage for what we expect to do in the program. Strategic Energy Management is the name. Acronym is SEM. And in Strategic Energy Management, the idea is that program participation is not a one and done project. it's a long-standing engagement with customers. And key to that is showing up as sort of an unbiased ally with those customers, not trying to upsell any particular solution, but hearing about what they're doing and trying to collaboratively find solutions. SEM, I think an easy way to think about it is energy management training. Through energy management training, we build an energy management team. There's a couple of key staffers with customers who are part of that. We go through a goal setting process, developing a carbon management plan. Treasure hunts are the equivalent of on-site audits. And all of this results in developing what we call an opportunity register to catalog projects, prioritize them based on how feasible they are, how cost effective they are, and to the extent that they meet customers' priorities. Ongoing technical support and coaching is sort of foundational to what we do. There's monthly check-ins with customers. But I think the real thing that SEM does well is get in front of pretty common barriers that happen with these customers, namely executive buy-in on things that need to happen. And so right out of the gate, we need to determine who the decision maker is. That's part of the enrollment process. Define the executive sponsor, define who the carbon champion is on site. These are the silly names for those who are involved in the program. But we get executive sponsorship buy-in right out of the gate. So they know what's expected, and we know what project types are worth considering, what sort of payback parameters there are, ROI thresholds, whatever it is. We know that stuff up front. So this is built on the strategic energy management model. It's a really weedy program type with a 75-page program manual issued by the commission, and not worth going any further on it. But I think the key message here is this is a SEM-like program with a carbon focus. So instead of ranking energy efficiency opportunities, we're ranking and seeking out carbon savings. A common question with this type of program is really surrounding what is decarbonization in the C&I space. We often think of decarbonization as meaning electrification. And with C&I customers, that's not really possible. Electrification is sometimes the solution, but we have to be aware of gas savings opportunities and gas efficiency. A lot of times, equipment is so large or particular to a site that it's simply not going to be replaced, or at least not anytime soon. So having an opening to do both is foundational to this programmatic approach. And this is also supported by the DOE's Industrial Decarbonization Roadmap, issued in 2022, which catalogs 4 pillars of industrial decarbonization: energy efficiency, electrification, low carbon fuels, and carbon capture. We're going to be focused primarily on the first 2. Key values for this customer. I think one great reason for SVCE to be running this program is we have a fantastic customer base for this program. We did run a pilot version of this program over the past 6 or 7 months. Given budget constraints, we didn't do a lot of customer outreach, but we did speak with 8 of our largest key account customers. All of them were a resounding yes in their interest in participation, and I have never seen customer recruitment go that well. And the reason is that this aligns with things that they want to do or are already doing. So they already have fairly aggressive ESG and carbon goals, but they need help connecting the dots between facilities and energy management teams and the sustainability folks on the other side. And SVCE incentives will go a long way to help carry those projects forward as well. And for SVCE, this is a fantastic opportunity to strengthen a relationship with these customers and build our brand as a trusted partner, which will inevitably open the door for other things that we want to bring to them in the future. Large C&I accounts are great for carbon savings opportunities, but they are also a significant part of our peak load. And so when we consider demand flexibility or our Green Prime product or other custom gen products, this type of program is a great way to get in front of them and deliver that message that we're a trusted partner. Timeline and next steps. So again, we started a pilot version of this in 2023 in October. We ran a competitive solicitation for this program, which was released in February. We're seeking board approval tonight, and we expect to launch this program in the next month with some key program content being developed following the proposed board approval of the contract. So to close that.
Go ahead.
No, please.
Okay, I thought you said that's it. Okay.
Oh, well, just last, the recommendation, which is to authorize the CEO to execute the agreement with ClearResult in the total amount of $2 million, $2,489,087. Thank you.
Thank you. Very impressive. Very exciting to hear about something like this and the focus being on reducing emissions. Okay, questions? Director Klein, then Vice Chair Tyson.
Sure. So thank you for this. It's great to see new programs starting to roll out, and I understand, it takes a lot of effort to set parameters and kind of the pilot program and all that takes a while. For me, you started looking at kind of the 20 C&I customers and kind of the biggest users. There's kind of two ways to look at this, and it depends upon the size of the company. So conceivably, it's a small company with a large amount of waste, or a larger company that has a larger amount of emissions versus a large company with kind of, we'll say, mid-size emissions. And there's savings that, okay, we could get more bang for the buck in the smaller, or reducing kind of across the board in the larger company. There's a slight difference there. And so, maybe it's cheaper to look at the smaller company because it's a smaller footprint. The change is a lot easier to implement. But so we reduce their specific carbon emissions, or whatever programs we're looking at, versus kind of a narrow across the board for a larger company, a much bigger investment, but maybe the two of those might be equal as far as what we're trying to do from a program standpoint. How do we measure that, or how do we evaluate that from a program standpoint? Do you understand my question?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, complicated question. I think with this type of program model, it does require a certain level of interest. It requires significant interest from a customer, right? These projects tend to sell themselves, which is one of the great aspects of it. But it requires a company that has staff on board who can actually be there to be part of these monthly conversations, participate in workshops, have a management structure that's open to devoting staff to that. I didn't include this in the presentation, but one thing that this program will do is pay incentives that we refer to as milestone incentives. So milestone incentives are for completing tasks like attending all of the workshops, sharing data with us that we need to understand how we can normalize for production in a given year to understand what the carbon savings actually were. And it tends to be that medium-sized customers aren't ready to commit with that level of interest. It does take a lot on behalf of customers to be a part of a program like this. So I think that's really where we see the boundary, is like there just tends to be the most interest among the largest customers that we'll speak to. But I'm not sure we would have a closed door either. And I think over time, if we seek external funding or find external funding for this program, there may be a good case to open it up to a broader customer segment. But I think it will be the largest key accounts that are a good fit.
Okay, you touched on one of my next or later questions, but external funding. So you talked about DOE, and we're looking at funding this mainly from SVCE. Are we doing kind of partnership grants of trying to help, let's say, the top 20 apply for grants? Is that a direct thing, or is that something that we do as an organization conceivably to say, here we're dedicating $2 million towards this program? Is there matching from a DOE standpoint for something, whether or not it's decarbonization or not carbon sequestration, but depending upon what that is from an efficiency standpoint?
Yes, there are really good opportunities for seeking out additional funding. First and foremost would be ratepayer-funded energy efficiency programs. We're calling this a decarbonization program. It is a decarbonization program, but a lot of times the projects that we uncover will fit within the traditional energy efficiency framework, which means customers will be eligible for incentives and rebates under those programs as well. And we intend to make sure that the way that we propose projects and the way that we quantify savings aligns with what those programs need as well, so that they are eligible. With respect to grants, there are certainly grant opportunities. The CEC has been rolling out a series of industrial decarbonization grants over the past, I want to say, couple of years. They're generally project focused in a particular niche area. So if a customer has that specific type of equipment, we will certainly be supporting that grant application. My absolute wish would be to find programmatic funding for this program with an additional grant. There's one grant that may be a decent fit open actually right now with the CEC. But it's really a new area. So I think we will see more of these grant opportunities become available in the coming years. Again, that DOE industrial decarbonization roadmap, the DOE and the CEC are very much aware of the need to focus on industrial decarb because it hasn't been grappled with much yet. And we'll just have to stay tuned, and we'll certainly be trying.
I appreciate that. And from an organizational standpoint, and I'm not sure where this falls, does our CEO, does the organization have authority to apply for these grants without getting additional board approval, or is it something that would have to come back to us? Just trying to get a better feel for that. I'm not sure.
I may have to have Justin chime in here as well, but I think traditionally we've applied for these on our own. Okay. I think the one that we mentioned earlier was only because we were doing it on behalf of some cities, and we would have to support it through that memorandum of agreement. But otherwise, we don't bring grant applications to the board typically, do we?
Yeah, I would say that historically it sort of has depended whether or not the funding that we're allocating, sort of if there's a match requirement or something of that nature, is that consistent with authority that has already been granted to us by the board through a program approval or something like that. In that case, saying, hey, we're going to use these incentives that were set aside for home electrification to try to unlock some additional funding for that. I think that would feel sort of consistent with that direction. I think what we have done in other grants that we have submitted for is we've said, pending board approval. And so we will, because there's a lot of panning that has to happen, right, in order to find actual opportunities that come up. So we don't necessarily want to be bringing every single thing we're considering to you all, but before we are allocating new funding towards a new concept or anything, I think that's the way we've done it.
No, and I appreciate that. Two last quick questions. Sorry for the number of questions. As far as the silly name sponsors and making sure that we're getting the right people in each of these companies on board, is it kind of are you, let's say, working with the top 20 and kind of getting them together? Are we just basically trying to get them educated, each company separately? Are we trying to caucus the big companies in our area so that they can interchange ideas, as well as kind of showing what we're doing across our district?
Really great question. The program model, I mentioned strategic energy management. It does generally frame itself around the concept of cohort enrollment, so multiple customers together being part of this. And the reason for that is for there to be an exchange of ideas. We like to be pliable on that because many customers have privacy considerations and don't want to be part of a group cohort. So we'll take it as it comes as we find, our first recruits. Those who are open to a cohort format, we likely will proceed with a cohort format. Even if it is a cohort training, there are elements of their participation that's still individualized. But I expect that to reach our goals and spend, a good chunk of our budget with this program, it may not take that many customers. So I'm not sure if there would be multiple cohorts or how many would be in there, but we'll see.
And I appreciate that. And lastly, we're focusing on kind of decarbonizing the existing customers. I can think of 2 within Sunnyvale that are, let's say, under construction for large projects. So Intuitive Surgical, robotics, robotic manufacturing, and, Applied Materials, which just a few weeks ago we approved their $4 billion chip R&D development, which will have a certain amount of equipment and all that. Not that we're decarbonizing what's already out there, but are we at least trying to educate, let's say, customers that are expanding or already investing on new facilities, to say, not that we're going to fund them, but making sure that as they go online, they're trying to be as energy efficient as they're, or from good for us, but getting them to think about that even before they're complete in their manufacturing, if that's kind of the focus of where the big bang is better from, our district or from our region.
Another great question. Yeah, we have spoken with Intuitive and Applied.
Okay.
Okay. I don't expect that we'll be providing specific coaching on expansions necessarily or new facilities, but the content that does get covered in the workshops is still up for discussion. We're going to be focused on what topic areas might provide the most carbon benefit first and foremost. One topic that comes to mind is demand management, which matters to customers a great deal as well. So while we may not correlate that quite as strongly with the carbon metrics that we're seeking, it is a content area that's important to SVCE and one that we'd like to have in front of customers. Another example is refrigerants and a non-energy driver of emissions, and another topical area that is worth considering as one of our workshop topic areas and training areas. So we're approaching it with an open mind, but don't have those areas finalized yet. That will happen over the coming month.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to go on.
Thank you, Dr. Clyde. Vice Chair Tyson.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. And by the way, in my world, champion is not a silly word. And nothing happens without champions. And so identifying them and getting them rolling is a good thing. Do I understand that when you refer to decarbonization, you're not talking about electrification, is what I think I heard you said, but other areas that might be more energy and efficiency, or the point you just raised about the refrigerant use or replacement?
Correct.
So that's the general idea. Okay.
Not strictly electrification.
Okay. Well, you're giving me echoes of my manufacturing background here, where different organizations will have something called process excellence or Six Sigma, and they might train green belts or black belts, and the whole key to any of this working is to have a methodical decision-making process to identify a project and then come up with metrics for tracking its improvement. So I applaud this. I'm just wondering, in terms of the clear result role, will they have those sorts of methodical experts to then bring those projects to your, say, you identify your top 2 or 3 kind of a signature project or C&I customers that you want to get started with and then build momentum. So what exactly will their role be in that sense of training and then also project identification?
Great question. Add another silly word to the mix. Clear Result will be staffing the role of the energy coach, or the carbon coach in this case. And so that's sort of the key point of contact with the program who helps steer their participation. Clear Result also has the engineering team to support more complex projects in whatever area it may be. Clear Result also is tasked with much of the measurement and verification, so ingesting the prior year's gas consumption data, normalizing for whatever's happened in the previous year, and modeling it against what the proposed project is. So they have a large role in the program. We are largely funding the program and participating. We're going to be part of these workshops, and there will be an SVCE brand presence.
Great.
But the technical ability and the structure for participation will largely fall on Clear Result.
Sounds really good. Thank you.
Thank you for that key question, Vice Chair. Director Makachuk.
This sounds very, very interesting, very exciting. So I'm going to follow on Director Tyson's question. How much are we spending on this internally versus the 2.5 million that is specifically going to Clear Result?
So the 2.5 million that would be paid to Clear Result is 100% SVCE funded, would be 100% SVCE funded. Additional program funding that we would seek out would likely go towards electrification incentives for customers, that sort of thing.
Let me restate my question. How many FTEs at SVCE are going to be working on this? Order of magnitude, is it 1, 2, 3, 5, 8?
1.5.
1.5, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Best guess.
So it's largely identifying the key accounts and then working on those relationships to sell the idea.
Correct.
And it's kind of like, so they are kind of like a HERS verification type thing where you're doing energy, what's the result of this? So they're fulfilling that role?
Yeah, they fulfill a role in a really critical role in customer engagement and being the entity that's facilitating that 2-year participation. It's a multi-year cycle for these customers. On the verification side, they create the energy models, carbon models effectively, that unpack the opportunity, avoided emissions, and I guess it's a hybrid of roles.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Showalter.
Thank you. Well, I have a bit of a comment as well as a question. I'm always doing water analogies, sorry, but that's just my background. But in the 80s and 90s in San Francisco Bay, we had a real problem of having too many heavy metals going into the bay. And they were going through our wastewater treatment plants and being dumped in, and the processes, the wastewater treatment processes for the most part didn't take them out. So it was obvious that what had to be done was source control. So there were all these inspectors that went out to talk to various corporations. The sewage treatment plant, of course, could do testing and find out what heavy metals were coming out of whose pipe, and go back and say, well, you can't do this anymore. We have to figure out how you're not going to do this. Now, some people took this, they didn't want to be polluting the bay, and so they took it upon themselves to figure it out and stop it. And then there were others that, fines needed to be levied, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing that was learned by this that I found just fascinating at the time, sort of being a freshly minted engineer, was that They didn't need anybody from an agency to tell them how to do that. When they were given the direction that this was a problem and they needed to figure out how to get it out of their waste train, they knew enough about their processes that they were able to figure that out. And so I mean, of course, the regulations were different than what we're doing, but one of the things that was very, very valuable in that process was the recognition at the time that they were doing the right thing. So that's really my question. First of all, I hope you will be talking to some of the old guard from the Palo Alto treatment plant who worked on this. I know Monica knows many of these individuals, and maybe get some lessons learned about how to approach it. But anyway, what's the recognition system that we're going to have for these corporations that are doing the right thing and making a difference? Because they all want to be seen as green. So if we, as a sort of an outside authority figure, give them recognition, that's a currency for them.
Absolutely. It's one of the first points that we raise with customers in recruitment, that we're here as an ally to help tell the story of your wins, like what projects we implement. These are yours and we want to help champion them. How we do that, I think SVCE can certainly help tell that story, but really it's showing what projects have been done, quantifying the impact, and putting that back in the hands of the staff that have helped carry that forward on site with customers.
But we don't have any, we don't have award levels or anything that we're setting up. Okay.
But we could. It could be part of the effort.
And I would.
This is a fine idea, and I do think if you let the industries kind of take it and run with it, I think it's going to be immensely successful.
Thank you.
Other questions? I saw two hands simultaneously. Director Martinez Beltran and then Director Meadows.
Thank you. Great. That's a great point. I really love that, and I hope that we do incorporate that, because I think you're right. I think recognition goes a really far way. It's another currency that we always underestimate, but there's a lot of power in it. I too wanted to comment. I mean, this is great, and down to your silly names. I love it. I love the energy. I love the creativity. It's probably one of the things that makes me so drawn to this organization, is just the ingenuity and the constant creation to be relevant, to be new, to be cutting edge. And I think this is a program that can hopefully do that. I'm wondering, you talked a lot about it. It looks like there was 2.5 million already. This is an additional 2.5 million to get this going. I'm just wondering, can you speak a little bit about how we're leveraging the first 2.5 million? I'm with you. I just want to understand more.
Yeah, so I think I can help answer that. So this program overall, you can think of as having like a $5 million budget. 2.5 is for the contract that we're looking for approval for. 2.5 will be for the incentives. Which, as Joey said, we kind of have the total, but we're going to figure out how exactly we allocate those. We have a portion of the budget already approved in previous budgets that were allocated by the board. We don't have the full 5 million approved, and so my plan is to, in the next fiscal year budget, to include the remaining to basically fund this program. So if the board chooses not to fund that, then this program would only be kind of half as large as it is, and we're not going to run into any issues in terms of spending before we have it, because this will take a little while to get going.
Got it. Thank you. I just wanted to understand that. And then I also wanted to understand, for those clients that do come on board, that are excited and get engaged, and they're really, I guess, I don't know if I'm answering my own question. Is there a commitment that they stay with SVCE?
Not at this time.
Okay. Do we feel that we might need that?
to be clear, they would be withdrawn from the program if they left SVCE service. This is open to SVCE customers only.
Okay. Maybe I can just add that there could be a component to this where we combine it with our like Green Prime Direct and offer a custom product. That's where Don would come in with his expertise. If Joey said, hey, we have a potential here to maybe do two things, help them decarbonize and help them retain them as a long-term customer as well.
Very good.
Yeah.
And that's why she's CEO.
I just put the pieces together, the people.
Agreed. She brings 30 years of fabulous experience. She knows it all. Okay, Director Meadows.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm going to ask a question, and I may be looking at this all wrong, but looking through the materials. So let me just walk you through my question. So in one of the background materials, it talks about the administration budget, and it talks about a performance fee of $230 per metric ton of CO2, right? And so, and we have, in this table I'm looking at, which covers the 4 years of the program, it talks about a total not to exceed per category of $1.859 million spent incenting metric tons of carbon reduction. Would that be a correct? If we're paying $230 per metric ton, it's really an incentive for that reduction? Is that what?
Yeah, we refer to that as their performance payment. So
Their performance payment, okay. So, and so I took that total not to exceed of 1.859 million divided by the 230, and I got that we were looking to incent at the most about 8,882 metric tons of CO2. Is that?
that's correct.
That's correct. Okay. All right, good. So then I took that 8,082 metric tons by the total program cost so far, 4.86 million. And that looks like we're paying about 601 total cost, if you attribute the whole program cost, $601 to reduce 1 metric ton of carbon. Is my thinking still? Yeah, okay.
That sounds correct.
All right, good, thank you. So I just wonder how that relates to what we usually pay for our emission reductions. Is this a really good price for the emission reduction, kind of run-of-the-mill, or are we paying it high because we're testing this program? So, and I have no idea, but essentially $600 to eliminate a metric ton of carbon. Is that good?
Great question. I'll have Justin chime in here as well. My understanding is it is on the low end outside of things like reach codes and potentially EV charging efforts.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the fundamental answer to your question is this is a nascent area. As Joey said, this is partially about building relationships with these customers, trying to understand what are the needs. If we end up with projects that I think look more like retro commissioning and things like that, I think depending on what we get, it will affect kind of how easy some of the projects are to fund. So especially when we do the incentive side of things, that may change the final math. But this is, reach codes, things like that, as Joey said, those are incredibly cost effective. So once you get to the point of being able to require some of this and show that it's working, things get a lot better. But when you are trying to demonstrate, you often are paying kind of on the higher end. This, I would say, we look at the cost per metric ton across all of our programs in the portfolio and kind of are tracking that, trying to understand what that looks like. This is somewhere in the middle, I would say, or maybe on the lower end, because again, a lot of what we do is trying to test out new approaches or providing a lot of customer assistance for certain things. So depending on the program you look at, yeah, this falls somewhere on the spectrum, I would say.
So it makes sense to me, we'd pay more for a pilot, if I can call this a pilot, which it is in essence, I think, since it's a novel approach. But I also wonder if we're going to throw, I mean, and this is different because it's not all electrification based. It's based at meeting them where they are and where they're generating, right? And some of that is around gas and behaviors and whatever that acronym, BRO, the BRO type accommodations to make improvements. But, well, I didn't make up the acronym. No, I did not. But I just wonder if do we get more, and I know it's hard to answer and we really have to run the pilot and there's efficiencies that we can gather, but it seems like if we could get more bang for the buck in electrification versus in these BRO accommodations or whatever. But we won't really know it till we run the pilot. It's just, I had no sense, and I appreciate you telling me this is a middle-of-the-road cost for mitigation, because I have no way to otherwise evaluate it. But I think we'll have to keep an eye on it because it may be a more costly way, an indirect way in the long term to achieve our goals. But
yeah, I think I would, I mean, some great points. I would just say, at the end of the day, when we're trying to reach the territory's climate goals and really driving all of the carbon out of these sectors, this is a sector that is, a fifth of our total emissions. So we are going to have to tackle it, right? I mean, as we try to move through all of this. And so a lot of, the role that we have taken on has been trying to test out some things. So yes, this even, at this higher funding level, this is still a pilot. As Joey said, I mean, this is maybe not going to be that many projects if we can get some big projects, but it is, novel. It is pushing kind of the conversation forward on those fronts. And so I think it is, it's important for us to be taking that leadership position, particularly because of the customers that we serve, right, and who's in this area. So I think some good points. I think that, yeah, if you think about it compared to a lot of the residential programs that we're running, right, again, we have some programs that are more incentives that, we can kind of reduce admin costs, you get them out the door, you can do that in a more cost-effective way. Policies certainly very cost-effective, but we also have things like the concierge program, right, the Go Electric Advisor, where it's really hard to attribute the emissions reductions associated with that. You're maybe doing a lot of hand-holding, but we know it's super important to help people go through that journey. So again, at the portfolio level, I think we have this spread. And so yes, this one, I think we want to keep our eye on it, but in the same way that we want to keep our eye on all of them as we're doing this. So I think bang for the buck, I mean, it's always important to look at, but also kind of, this is our first foray into this new and ultimately going to be very important sector. So just important to keep that in mind, I think.
no, I appreciate that. And maybe the end result is we need to just have more aggressive performance targets. But again, that's something that this experiment can tell us. And Don's nodding back there. So, all right. Thank you.
May I just add, though, that I think that's a very good point, Director Meadows, and it's certainly one that we want to look at, not just on the program side, but also on some of the carbon mitigation measures we take on the wholesale side for our power supply portfolio, because we know that each metric ton of reduction there is also becoming more and more expensive. And I think another really good thing to remember is, like, this is the first program of its kind in the nation, certainly in the state, too. And so these opportunities for funding, for grants, help from the CEC, use of public purpose funds, those are going to be more available, I think, to us as early adopters than if we prolong and wait to roll this out 5, 10 years, whatever. So I think, we definitely want to try to get as much funding as possible, and I think that'll help mitigate some of these costs as well.
Would add one last piece, which is that as we prioritize projects with customers, they're going to be ranked in terms of a number of priorities. But one of them will be the cost effectiveness of avoided carbon. And so to the extent that the BRO measures, and I'm glad you nailed that acronym, it's a funny one. The BRO measures will be low cost to implement. They may not need much of an incentive. And so you may see an incentive structure in the final program that's reflective of that, a very low incentive rate for any behavioral retrocommissioning or operational item that delivers savings, and a much higher incentive rate for a true electrification project. I think we can expect that the electrification projects will be much less cost effective, and we may not be able to afford many of them among the C&I customers that we enroll. We can expect very expensive projects.
Okay, other questions? What I love about this great team here is we have discussion while we're still in the question period, which is wonderful. It's called efficiency of time. Okay, open the public comment period. Close the public comment period. And I believe someone here wanted to make a motion, unless there is another. Go ahead and make a motion, and then I'll check if any other comments.
I would like to make a motion to authorize the CEO to execute an agreement with Clear Result.
Director Showalter?
And I would like to second it.
Okay, wonderful. Any other thoughts? Okay, big thank you. Great discussion. Thanks to the board here as well. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? None. Abstain? None. Passes unanimously. Wonderful. Great job, great presentation, great discussion.
Thank you.
Great teamwork. Okay. Almost toward the end, board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Any announcements, board members? Director Klein.
Sure, I'll just be relatively short. I just wanted to congratulate SVCE for achieving the award at the Cal CCA conference. I was sorry I wasn't there. I had city attorney interviews that day, and last night we were there until almost midnight, but we ended up appointing our new city attorney last night. So it was a day well spent away, but happy to see that the Vargas Elementary project received that award from Cal CCA. And then I just also want to echo what was said earlier about thank you for SVCE staff for being at our Earth Day event. It was fantastic to open up the 6 acres of open space around our new city hall. So the city hall that's LEED Platinum Net Zero, but now because we tore down the old city hall, the annex, portable buildings and a little office park, we now have 6 acres of wildflowers, picnic tables, an amphitheater, a tree walk. So all these trees that are very, basically very mature trees that we either moved 12 large trees or kept them. It's just amazing to see. So I welcome all of you to visit our city hall when you get a chance, if you haven't already, and now the 6 acres of grounds around it that we opened up on Earth Day. But it was great to see our partners there and heard a lot of positive feedback about, our Drive Electric event and other things that we had going that day. But thank you to SVCE staff.
Thank you. And I have checked out those grounds in addition to the building. It is something special. Other announcements? Director Mohan.
I too wanted to compliment SVCE for a couple of things. One, and I was just talking to Director Mikichuk about this, we do have the portable EV charging station, which is actually parked out there in the library field today. So those of you who have electric cars, electric vehicles, feel free to use it. I don't know if it's still working, but don't hold me to it, but it is available. So thank you for that. It's quite the talk of the town. My other point was, we had a really exciting cooking session with Chef Martin Yan on the beauty of induction cooking. And SVCE had a role in it. I saw a table there, but it's just amazing. He had all these cooking appliances, induction stoves and stuff, and it was just amazing how quickly he was able to make absolutely delicious Chinese food using this. And in comparison, he had the sort of old-fashioned, whatever, gas stove, and there was a discernible difference between the two. So just wanted to point it out for anyone who's considering induction cooking. It works. Or at least it worked for Chef Martin Yan.
Thank you, Director Mohan. Other announcements? Okay, I have a very small one compared to those two. I just wanted to share the happy news that Saratoga's Cooper Garrett Vineyards were honored for their leadership in going green. This is for a Vineyards Community Award. So every bit counts, and they are one of our they have a large presence in Saratoga. Okay, with that, we are going to move to the closed session. Before we go into the closed session, I would like to take public comment, if there is any. Seeing none, let's take a pause here and we'll go into closed session. Okay, we are back from the closed session and there is nothing to report. With that, thank you everyone. It's 9:18 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned.